There it is.
Victor Sims, the Z historian. On January 5, 1980, the semi-decomposed body of a woman was discovered in the playing field behind Lusaka Boys Primary School. From personal belongings scattered nearby, it was determined that the victim or the woman was Grace Siambilu, 21, who had apparently traveled from Sinazongwe to Lusaka to deliver a letter to her brother. Evidence at the crime scene seemed to suggest that the body was dragged where it was discovered and that Siambilu was killed somewhere else.
Who's there?
The implications were obvious and chilling. Someone not only committed the gruesome act and dragged the body, they wanted the police to find it. Meaning this was only the beginning.
We found another body.
The very next day on January 6th, another woman was found dead on a road path on Chitukuko Road. This time, it was determined that the unidentified woman was sexually assaulted and murdered where she was found. The body had significant strangulation marks around the neck, with some forming around the mouth and nose, suggesting she may have been drugged or that the killer used some form of chemical substance to sedate
Tension is
her.
mounting in northwestern province as the Mashala rebellion is said to be expanding.
The killings would continue for 9 months, with girls and young women brutally murdered in similar circumstances, with the body found almost each week. But that's not all. Even more disturbing was that all the bodies were left in fairly open areas where they could easily be found.
This guy is playing with us.
And to be sure, when the 16th victim was found on March 25th, next to the body was a message supposedly left for the Lusaka police.
Call the chief, we have a problem.
It's the 1980s, a few years after Zambia gained independence, and people have moved rapidly from the rural areas into the cities. And Lusaka, Zambia's capital, has come alive. But with more and more people coming to the city, something else became more and more prevalent. Crime. Armed robberies, muggings, car thefts increased rapidly, spreading fear through the streets. Some blamed foreign freedom fighters who had left behind a trail of illegal firearms, while others pointed to cross-border incursions of criminals hiding from the law. But government officials have a different theory. They insist that the rise in crime is no coincidence, but rather a deliberate conspiracy by enemies of the state and foreign entities bent on tearing the country apart.
She has always wanted to destabilize us because we are staunch supporters of the struggle for democracy in South Africa and independence in Namibia. The other reason is that we have racial harmony in this country.
There are also rumors of insurgency linked to the actions of one Adamson Musha. Police are overwhelmed with investigations, and it is around this period that some begin reporting seeing a strange figure stalking them at one of the local bus stations. The strange man, described as wearing noticeable military fatigue, would be seen at bus and railway stations where he would spend hours waiting, silently watching as people went by, as if searching for something. When the body of 15-year-old Miriam Chiwala was found between Duli Motors and Chibolia, besides her body, her killer left a cryptic message which read,
"Nothing to say, guys, and don't mind all what I told you when you were going for elections. Comrades, no woman now. Please, my friends, be careful how you walk. Yours, no woman now."
The message seemed to make no sense, but sounded as if directed at someone who knew what was going on and held some form of power or authority. After the message, there was sheer panic and a sudden sense of urgency from the police to catch the killer. Media campaigns warned women to be vigilant, and a strict dusk to dawn curfew was imposed, and a reward of 10,000 Zambian kwacha was offered to anyone with information that would lead to the person now known as the Lusaka Strangler. A special investigations team led by Superintendent William Mundia was set up, and Operation Rosemary was launched.
We need 24 hours surveillance.
And on July 16th, there was finally a breakthrough in the case.
Wait, madame, you have to sign in.
I need to speak to Superintendent Mundia.
It's around 7:30 p.m. and Detective Constable Chikoti from the Special Investigation Team is on stakeout around Kamwala bus station. He observes what seems to be a normal conversation between a woman in a green dress and a soldier in combat fatigue. He routinely takes down the description of both. After about an hour, the pair disappear. The very next day, 19-year-old Nora Soko reported that she had just survived an attack by a man she suspected was the Strangler. According to her report, on the evening of July 16th, Nora was traveling from Quito to Lusaka to visit her parents in Makeni and arrived at the Kamwala bus station slightly late. Not long after she disembarked from the bus, she was approached by two soldiers, one in combat uniform and the other in a more formal green uniform. The second soldier left, but the one in combat uniform offered to escort her to Makeni. Despite her declining the offer, the man picked up her belongings, forcing her to follow him behind. And as they walked down the small path, he introduced himself as Lieutenant Nyambe. He asked her if she could identify him in civilian clothes, to which she replied she could, and upon hearing this, the soldier suddenly pushed her to the ground and began choking her. Nora fought off her attacker, who put out a spanner wrench and struck her with it. But Nora would not relent, and during the struggle, 3 security guards on duty nearby heard Nora's screams of terror and began rushing towards her direction while blowing their whistles. Frustrated, the killer hit her again before fleeing the scene. His last words were,
You are the only girl whom I have failed to kill, but I have killed the rest. It's you who will have me arrested.
Nora Soko sustained multiple bruises on her abdomen and along the side of her neck. She also began developing sores on her tongue, likely caused by the unknown chemical substance used during her attack. Despite her ordeal, Nora offered to help the police and stated that she could positively identify the Strangler. It was now confirmed that the Lusaka Strangler was either a soldier or someone impersonating one. He was stout, slightly medium height, and had a very heavy Lozi accent. After the Nora incident in July, the killings stopped. There was not a single report for the entire month of August. But on 12th September, another body was found. But this time, rather than strangulation, the victim's abdomen had been mutilated so horrifically that her entrails were hanging out. Could this have been the work of the Strangler, a copycat, or something else? If it was indeed the Strangler, he was beginning to slip up, and it was only a matter of time before he made a fatal mistake. And that mistake came only a week later. On 17 September, Josephine Mukatasha, with her baby daughter, left their home in Chingola to travel to Mumbwa via Lusaka. On the way, she met and befriended a woman traveling to Petauke. At 18:15 in the evening, the two women arrived in Lusaka and realized that at that hour there were no buses scheduled to either of their destinations. And together, they decided to spend the night at the bus station in hopes of leaving early the following morning. It wasn't long before they were approached by two soldiers who inquired about their movements and demanded to see their identification cards. The soldiers then proposed to accommodate the women at one of the nearby hotels and picked up the belongings of the woman traveling to Petauke. But Josephine refused to join the two and decided to stay back. After a while, one of the men came back and insisted that it wasn't safe for Josephine and her baby to be out alone in the night. And finally, Josephine reluctantly accepted to follow him to the hotel where the other woman bound for Petauke was said to be comfortably resting. Josephine regained her consciousness only to find her baby lying beside her crying. Her national registration card, which had been in her suitcase, was placed near her head, and the suitcase was gone. Her wristwatch and her wedding ring were also taken. Relieved to be alive, she quickly picked up her child and staggered towards some houses to seek help, where she managed to find refuge for the night. The next morning on September 18th, Josephine reported her attack to the SIT, who now knew that they were looking for 2 men instead of 1. Nora Soko and Josephine Mkatasha's attacker were the same person, and he seemed to operate in the same area. The SIT now had a suspect and a plan.
Let's finish this.
On September 25th, about a week after Josephine's attack, the SIT sent detectives and Josephine to Kamwala bus station to see if she could spot the man who tried to take her life. The plan was simple. Josephine would wander out in the open and essentially lure out the strangler into a trap, whilst undercover detectives would observe from a distance. At 7:30 p.m., just as expected, a man in army uniform approached Josephine and introduced himself to her. Despite having attacked her only a week before, he seemed not to recognize her.
Do I know you?
Josephine refused quickly, coming up with a story that she had just arrived from Chingola, and just as the previous time, he offered her a stay at a local hotel. From his voice, Josephine knew that this was indeed the man who attacked her previously. And sure enough, on the man's wrist, in plain sight, was Josephine's missing watch, the same watch that was stolen the night she was attacked. Smiling politely, she agreed to join the man and asked him to wait for her as she collected her belongings. As he waited, Josephine alerted the officers who were watching in a distance, and when the signal was given, detectives swooped in. After putting up some resistance, the soldier was finally subdued and taken to Lusaka Central Police Station.
We got him.
The suspect was identified as Lance Corporal Milton Mfungulwa Sipalo, aged 33, a soldier stationed at Arakan Barracks. Immediately, a search warrant was released for his home in the barracks. At Spalo's home, police seized a number of items including unnamed chemical substances, some of Josephine's belongings, and those of 9 other women previously murdered. On the table were crime magazines with images of murdered women, a grotesque window into the suspect's mind. A few days later, an identification parade at Lusaka Central Police was set up and witnesses were called in. Nora Soko, Josephine Mkatasha, and Joyce Mwape stepped forward, and without hesitation, they all pointed to Sipalo.
That's him.
When confronted with the evidence, Sipalo does not deny the accusations. Instead, he argues that he was being used and that the person the police should have been looking for was someone else. By all indication, Sipalo had something he was hiding, something perhaps which would explain what at that point seemed to be senseless acts of cold-blooded murder. The man seated before the police seemed to be anything but senseless. Some of the people Sipalo pointed to was a fellow soldier by the name of Kennedy Kalue, a Mr. Munsopo, and a Mr. Piri, allegedly members of a dissident group led by Adamson Mushala. What followed was a grim procession as Sipalo led police to several specific locations around Lusaka, places where he allegedly committed his crimes. But just as it seemed as though Sipalo would finally reveal what he was hiding from the police, the story took a sudden turn. October 1st, a few hours after being identified as the Lusaka Strangler, Milton Mfungulwa Sipalo is dead. According to the police, Sipalo made a desperate break from Assistant Superintendent Peter Fufu at Lusaka Central Police Station. He dashed through the building, forcing doors open with his elbow before escaping to the rooftop. There, high above the city, he threatened to end his life. For nearly an hour, police and firefighters pleaded with him to surrender, but he reportedly mocked their efforts. In the end, before shocked onlookers and news reporters, Sipalo allegedly leaped to his death. But instead of closing the case, Sipalo's death only deepens the mystery. There are several inconsistencies that come to light following Sipalo's untimely death. Firstly, new evidence suggests that most of the victims in the final months were not strangled but mutilated. This was considered very strange, as typically a serial killer's signature behavior, which is the unique psychological and emotional needs the offender satisfies, remains consistent over time. Another interesting revelation was that despite the police reporting that Sipalo had jumped off the rooftop, not a single witness during the incident actually saw him jump.
I can't remember.
In addition, one fireman observed something even stranger, that among the police officers talking to Sipalo on the roof before he jumped was the deputy police chief. With so much speculation, later a coroner's court ordered Commissioner of Police Mr. Henry Mutonga to identify all the police officers who were on the rooftop of Central Police when Milton Sipalo jumped to his death. Furthermore, thus far, the motives behind Sipalo's killings and whether or not he was acting alone had not been established. But on February 27, 1981, Assistant Superintendent Fufu, who was allegedly with Sipalo before he escaped police custody, told Coroner Nora Kabamba that he had something to say. According to the superintendent, Sipalo and others had been hired by Adamson Mushala and his gang to murder the girls in order to discredit the government and security forces, thereby deviating attention from their insurgent activities in northwestern province. Furthermore, targeting young Lozi girls would also serve to make the Lozis hostile to the government and more sympathetic to the cause of the rebellion. Fufu further alleged that Kennedy Kaluwe, who was accused of conspiring with Sipalo, and Mr. Munsopo and Mr. Piri were all members of the gang holding different positions. However, Kaluwe denied the accusations, and his lawyer challenged the validity of the accusations based largely on information supplied by Sipalo in a statement to the police. The defense further claimed that Superintendent Peter Fufu was not at the police station at the time of Sipalo's death. He was rather out in the field, contrary to his claim that he was present during the jump. Following conflicting reports from the police and lack of substantial evidence, Kaluwe and others are eventually released, and the case is finally brought to a close after what police called 214 days in search of a serial killer. Milton Mufungulwe Sipalo is alleged to have murdered 29 young women and girls between January and September 1980. If this is true, it would make him the most active serial killer in history, murdering the most victims within the shortest amount of time.